Good morning and welcome. This is the CS-Sensei weekly Saturday morning webinar. Everyone is invited. Please feel free to join us at any time. Good morning, folks. I am here talking about resumes. I figured that's a good thing for us to do on a possible holiday weekend. Some people may be taking off extra days because of the 4th of July. But I wanted us to sort of spend some time talking about why a resume is, it's worth the time you spend on it. It honestly is. So I have an idea here for a, oops, somebody just gave me a beep. Hold on, what was that? LinkedIn, oh, okay, that's Christopher talking about something else. So I think it is, let me make sure. Yep, okay. So I'm going to share my screen and we can go from here. Okay, share, it's going to be my desktop. I'm not going to share sound. So there you go. And I do hope that everybody had a chance to look at the short video that I sent in reference to what a hiring manager or recruiter is going to look for and how long they're going to spend on your resume. I've seen statistics anywhere from 6 to 7.5 seconds they spend on your resume. Now, that means that if somebody has a 4, 5, 6-page resume, they will never get to those later pages. And frequently, I've had resumes that I refuse to look at. I think you've heard the phrase TLDR. You know what that means? TLDR?
Long didn't read.
Yeah. Reem, have you heard that one?
I have heard that one.
Too long didn't read. Yep. So when you are looking at a resume, time is of the essence. So your best approach on this is to make sure that you match the things that a recruiter is going to be looking for. And by the way, there are recruiters, and then there are HR specialists, then there are HR managers, all of which could review your resume before the hiring manager even sees it. So you've got to sort of run the gauntlet with people who may not be technical before it even gets to the person who could be hiring you. All right, so that's why it's got to be very focused, and it's got to elicit interest. So here's this. Here's what they pointed out, that when they're looking at your resume, there's certain things they look for. Number one, information about you. Are you local? If you have all the information that you can be contacted, if you don't put your contact information in up where they can see it very prominently, even if you're a great resume, how do they get back to you? In other words, make it easy for them to contact you, your name, your email address, your local address, and that's pretty much all you need at the top of your resume. Now, one thing I want to point out here, as you're looking at it, they go from your name to your year's experience. Okay, you notice what they skipped over. They skipped over your summary paragraph, and that is typical. So when you're thinking about some of these things, if you're trying to get your resume shortened down, your summary paragraph may be one of the first things you want to consider sacrificing. Just as a thought as you're doing this. Here's something else. So they get experience, all right? So you notice the two bullets they looked at: length of time that you are working. Do you meet the minimum necessary requirements for experience? Then they go down to education and technical skills. You notice what they overlooked there as well. They overlooked all of your bullet points because they're trying to make sure that you meet the minimum requirements. All right, that's an important thing to imagine here, and to make sure that you match that up. So you're looking at your name, and they'll point out, here we go. Name, current company and position, time that you've been working, previous positions, and that's again to say, did this person do something that was lengthy in time? Look for education possibilities, and that's it. So as you are doing this, you notice they said avoid pictures, make your resume clear and concise, and keep it in some sort of order. Keep it in some sort of order. All right, so we had someone else join us here. I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. There we go. Oh, hey, Nerman.
Hello, everyone.
So as you are putting your resume together, and I've seen this more frequently than I don't see this, okay? So frequently, people try, especially for if you're changing careers, they try and put everything in there in the hopes that they're going to catch the recruiter or the HR specialist with something, enough to pass minimum so that you can get that interview. The challenge you run into is that reviewer is very frequently non-technical. Very frequently. So your HR specialist, your recruiter may have some technical background, and they may be looking for certain things, but they may or may not know all of the magic that you've done. All they're looking for is to match what the hiring manager says in the job vacancy announcement compared to what you demonstrate on your resume. If they are too far apart from each other, your resume is rejected. It's put in the, maybe we'll look at this later stack. So here is just a resume I pulled up, which I think is a good representative resume. You notice the objective statement is nice and short, and by the way, it should match the vacancy announcement. In every case, make sure your resume matches the vacancy announcement. All right? Don't say, I want a job doing this or this or this or this, in a dynamic environment where I will be appreciated for my skills or anything like that. Be aware that that type of verbiage is overlooked. It will not gain you points to say I'm a hard worker. It won't gain you points to say, I'll take anything or something like that. Don't cast a broad net. Try and make your resume as focused as possible. So as we're looking at this resume, we see contact information, we see whatever we want. Now, you notice it says quick to learn, recent computer science graduate. As compared to what? A slow to learn person? The anticipation is that you're going to have skills that are going to be enough to put you into an interview. The HR specialist will not forward resumes unless they meet minimums. Okay, so quick to learn won't get you any. Oh, very good. We got Golru joining us. So also, you notice this says work experience and it's placed up high up. Good morning, Golru. The challenge is your work experience for an entry-level position will be minimal. You'll have minimal work experience. So as you're doing this, you may want to, for example, move your education or your skills into this prominent position so that you at least demonstrate something for the readers. Emphasize what you're best at, which may not be your work experience. And this week, one of the mentees handed me a resume and said, how about this? And the issue was that this resume was, I think it was 7 pages long, no, 8 pages long. And as we noticed, the recruiters or the hiring, or I'm sorry, not recruiters, I'm sorry, yes, the recruiters, the HR specialists, and the hiring managers all are going to look at your resume for a very short period of time. So as you're putting your resume together, and I've mentioned this before, make sure that, number one, your resume matches the vacancy announcement as much as possible. I'll cover that in a minute in a slide, but make sure that you change your resume to match the job vacancy announcement. Don't use one resume and keep sending it out regardless of the position and say, well, this is me. This is everything about me. Make sure that you focus on the things that they're looking for. All right? Not just, this is everything that I've ever done since I was in high school. That won't get you points with the reviewer. You notice here, this talks about very specific skills. And that's something that the HR specialist is going to look for, because the job vacancy announcement will state very specific skills that they're looking for. I need a SQL admin. I need an incident responder. I need someone with experience in, Linux administration or whatever. That's where your skills should match up with the vacancy announcement. Now, you notice here, these 2 projects that this person put in, and I hope it's big enough for you guys to be able to see it. I don't know if I can make it much bigger on my screen. But the individual says that they do things that have very little to do with data analysis. They're outside of their job, but it also points out that they have interests that align with the skills that they're looking for with the job. So what you did for your Elks Club, or what you did for your HOA, or what you did for a club that you're in, or those sorts of things, your church, they might all fit in to what makes you the best candidate. All right, so don't sell yourself short, and don't go trying to demonstrate that you meet everything, because you just won't be able to do that. Any questions before I go into my demonstration? I've got a little bit of a slide deck. Any questions or comments? Okay, one thing I want to ask you all is, how long is your resume? And if it's more than 3 pages long, it won't get read. Okay? It won't get read. No one is going to get to those later pages. So start there. The optimal resume, the easiest resume for someone to read, is going to be 1 or 2 pages long. Again, we notice that the recruiters spend 6 to 7, let's say less than 10 seconds on your resume. If you use, and this other person submitted their resume to me for review, and their experience sections, they had lots of experience, but it was in narrative paragraphs. I was hired in order to help blah, 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 blah. You know, and you had to read every single sentence in every single paragraph in order to be able to see what this person brought to the table. They're not going to do that. So be careful that you only put your power sentences in here. I'm going to pull this up one more time. When you look at the experience, you notice this person put one experience, just one. For a short resume, you may just have to put, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, and not, this is where I worked or anything like that. You may have to craft it in that manner so that your skills show up in the center. Think about it, especially for an entry-level position, because you don't have that long pedigree of experience. Your experience is not going to match. So I'm going to show this, and I hope it comes out pretty good. I literally threw this together in the last hour or so. So I may not even be in order with my slides. So let's say you have a resume. You submit it to the company or organization that you want to be hired into. Your resume is in response to a vacancy announcement, typically. They have a particular job vacancy announcement or announcements that they have come up with, and they say, we need this. We're looking for this. Within the vacancy announcement, they're going to specify minimum requirements, and your resume must match those minimum requirements. So if they say, I need somebody with this certification, you need to point out, if possible, that you have that certification. All right? And don't put it buried in with everything else. You know, you teach ESL classes. Okay, that should not be higher than your certification. All right? So I'm going to talk about a couple things. Resume customization, who looks at it, and what do they look for. All right? And by the way, I can't see anyone else except me. I'm sharing my screen, so I can't see anything. If you need to raise your hand or something, say it out loud, and we will talk to you, because I don't see hands raised. So resume customization, the first question people say, well, isn't my resume the resume? And the answer is no. Each time you look at a vacancy announcement, it's going to be slightly different. And you owe it to yourself and the reader to customize your resume each time you send it. I will highly recommend that you do not use one resume for every single job vacancy and say, well, this explains all of me. The resume isn't, or the reviewers are not looking for all of you. They are looking for people who match. So be careful that your resume, if in any way you can aim it toward that vacancy announcement, it will be helpful. Try and make it as focused as you possibly can toward that specific announcement. The announcement is the key. So I looked up on CyberSeek, and it says for entry-level positions, it could be a cybersecurity specialist, could be a cybersecurity analyst, could be a cybercrime analyst, It could be an incident and intrusion analyst. It could be an IT auditor. Those were all listed at cyberseek.org as being entry-level cybersecurity positions. Now, ask yourself, would anyone's resume address the specialized requirements for all the positions? And the answer is no. So if they have a vacancy, let's say for a cybersecurity analyst and an IT auditor, your resume should closely match, as closely as you can, each one of those. If you are submitting for 2 different vacancies, you may have 2 different resumes at the same job, at the same company, because it's going to match different things in the job vacancy announcement. So this is my statement. The winning resume will demonstrate to the reader how closely you match the vacancy announcement. Now you notice, oh, I'm gonna get this. Compare your resume to each vacancy announcement and try to match as many phrases as you can. And this is very important. Emphasize, but do not embellish. What I mean by embellishment is you overstate your amount of time that you worked. You overstate your skills. For example, you say that you have experience in SQL, but your experience is really in MySQL. They are 2 different things. Microsoft SQL and MySQL are very similar, but they are not the same. So be aware that if your experience is in MySQL, you can't say that you have experience in SQL. All right, so that's an important distinction to make, so the reader, you are not trying to get your job interview through false statements. Okay, embellishment will get you fired. All right, so who looks at it? Who looks at your resume? Well, there are 2 to 3 people that are going to look at your resume. Now, you notice I didn't even put the recruiter, but let's talk about the recruiter. The recruiter wants to help match up as many people as possible. So the recruiters are looking for resumes that interest them, that are exciting. They look for resumes that contain large amounts of specific information that appears to match. A recruiter wants to get I'll just say as many resumes as possible to the HR people and the hiring manager. The recruiter's job is to try and bring in sheep into the fold, if you will. So they're going to be looking at these resumes using a broad brush and say, it looks like this person matches. And if you closely match, they will move your resume higher up than everybody else. That's what a recruiter does. They are out shaking the bushes and seeing what falls out. The HR specialist, however, is examining resumes to make sure that you meet the minimum requirements for the position. The HR manager makes sure that you meet any legal requirements, such as you require a JD degree to be hired as a lawyer. You can say you've been studying Google as much as you like, but until you have passed the bar exam in your state, your knowledge and experience will get you nothing, for example. So the HR manager makes sure you meet the legislative minimums. And then after all of that occurs, the hiring manager will get your interview or your resume and start scheduling interviews. Okay, so let's look at the HR specialist, and I'm starting there because that's probably the first person who has the ability to reject your resume. Bad resumes will not get to the hiring manager. Monstrous resumes will not get to the hiring manager because the HR specialist, typically non-technical, is going to look at your resume first. And they could have 100, 200 resumes to sort through. So this is the first person that you have to please. And again, they're going to look for minimum requirements. For example, I gave, if it's a job requiring a security clearance, do they have citizenship or right to work here in America? They're going to look for that. Because if you don't have it, you will not meet the minimum requirements for a security clearance. That's it. You won't, your resume stops right there. Also, they look for years experience and or education, because frequently within the job vacancy announcement, it says you can substitute this much experience or education for this much experience. Watch for that in the vacancy announcement and maximize that if you can. Sometimes you can say, I have an associate's degree in, I don't know, liberal arts. I have an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree in English, or those sorts of things. Try and match up, again, the vacancy announcement as much as possible. Salary requirements. Here's where it gets tricky, because people typically won't put their salary requirements in their resume. It's probably not a good thing to put in there and say, I want 130K. Hire me. I'm really good. Well, if they're hiring for a position that says from $60,000 to $72,000 per year, and you say, I want 90,000 or 100,000, you're way out of their league. You have exceeded their maximum, and therefore you're not considered to be a good candidate. So that's why salary requirements are, they're, how do I say this? They're too sensitive for a recruiter to review, for an HR specialist to review, and for you to put in your resume. You typically will say salary negotiable if you put it in there. That's when the HR specialist is going to contact you and say, what are your salary expectations? They will contact you directly. This is before the hiring manager even sees your resume. All right? They're still trying to match you up to make sure you meet the minimum requirements for the job. So be very careful with the salary expectations, because they could disqualify you. And then the HR specialist is looking for specific skills. The HR manager, on the other hand, looks for exceptions. What if the person wants a higher salary? The HR manager is going to have to speak with the hiring manager and say, yeah, this person looks like they're a good fit, but they want $20,000 per year more than this position will allow. What do you want to do, hiring manager? The HR manager will also look for less experience and whether it can be substituted in other areas. What if you have fewer certifications than what is needed? And okay, this is the next one. I said, what do they look for? Minimum requirements. Oh yeah, I say a perfect resume will match the vacancy announcement 100%, because the HR manager wants to make sure that only the best candidate resumes get to the hiring manager. So they want you to match 100%. Will you? Probably not. But they're trying to get as close as possible to that 100% match. And they will rack and stack you based on how closely you match the job vacancy announcement. You know, this is I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hey, Scotty, I'll make a comment. That 100% should not discourage you from applying.
Correct.
If you meet 40 at minimum, or even 50, there's even some recruiters will say if you meet 30%. If you meet like a third of the requirements, put your name, throw your hat in, put your name in the application, put your resume in, and see what happens. Don't sit there and say you need to, for every single position, you need to meet 100% of these qualifications or what it says on the vacancy announcement. If you meet 30% of what it says on the vacancy announcement, throw your name, throw your resume in, see what happens.
Right.
Let them be the bad guy.
Very good. I appreciate that, Chris. This is something that you should do as a job seeker, and that is approach this with a mindset that you're going to get hired. And you just need to, pass through this gauntlet and let them exclude you. Be careful not to exclude yourself, like Chris was saying, before you even apply. The unsent resume is a 100% disapproval rate, and you don't want to be there. Think about this. If you're in a sales position, let's say you're selling, let's do the age-old example here. Let's say you're selling vacuum cleaners, and you're going to visit 100 households over the course of a month, let's say, and you need to sell 5 vacuum cleaners in order to make your salary or whatever. You're going to have 95 no's to get your 5 yeses. As an interviewee, you may have to go to numerous interviews to get that one yes. So be prepared. Understand that you're going to submit more resumes than are going to be callbacks. You're going to speak to more people than you need to get hired, and you're going to have more no's than you have yeses. But here's the thing. Don't get discouraged. You get through the no's in order to get to the yes. Consider every single no an opportunity to better yourself so that you get to that yes. There will be disappointment, and don't let that stop you. Be careful not to get discouraged. All right? So here's something that, thank you for that share, Chris, that is very important for them to realize. If I have a resume and I don't submit it, that sounds like a rejection, but it's not. You didn't even give them a chance to reject you. You didn't even allow them to look at your resume to say, well, maybe we can, lighten this up here, or instead of 3 years experience, maybe we can accept 1 year experience, because look at what this person has done elsewhere. And it sort of matches. It makes up for what we're looking for here. Those are all conversations that are had within the HR section. Okay, so if you do not submit your resume, don't be surprised if you don't get hired. You have to submit the resume. So here's something that I did for my HR specialist whenever I published a vacancy announcement, and I've had dozens of vacancies. You look for certain things that you must have or certain things that would be good to have. And because you as the hiring manager, I'll say me, I'm talking to the HR specialist who is not technical typically. HR is not expected to be technical. but they are expected to be able to look at the vacancy announcement and compare it to the resumes to see how closely they match. They look for specific phrases. If I need MySQL admin experience, they're looking for, on your resume, MySQL administration. Okay? For an example, they're looking for key phrases. And if you have a 4-page resume, you could have the right information, but it's buried 2 pages below the cover page, and they won't get to it because you did work for Safeway, or you worked for your local dog shampoo jobs, or whatever. Make sure that as much as possible you put those exact phrases as high as possible so they are prominently seen. Entry-level people make one mistake very frequently. Within your experience blocks, and I'm going to bring this up, within your experience blocks, you put what you did the most first and what you did the least last. So you look at these bullet points here, and they say, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. You notice when you look at this, you can't tell what they did more. You can't tell what they did less. So as you are putting your resume together, the things that most closely match the job vacancy announcement should be the highest in every section of your resume. That's why one resume won't work for multiple vacancy announcements, because you have to move things around, and I'll explain this in another slide, but you have to move things around to make their job easier. All right? So that's just something to think about. And like I said, as a hiring manager, I understand that the HR specialist does not have a technical lens to look through. So I give the HR specialist what we must have and what would be nice to have. A list of things to look for. And I put those in those key phrase orders. Now, here's what I was saying. You make their job easier by focusing your resume to match the vacancy announcement. If you submit one resume, don't be surprised if it takes a long time for you to get that interview, because you're trying to say, well, you know, I'm including everything I've done just in case I catch your attention. Don't do that. It's your job to focus your resume each and every time. Okay? So I was basically saying, is it worth the effort? Absolutely. It really is. That's where you are successful. Any conversation thus far? Any conversation? Y'all are listening, and I appreciate that, but it's important to remember that your resume has to focus on the vacancy announcement. So when you guys submit your resumes to, like, Chris and me for review, we are giving you general information. In other words, this is what a resume should do, and this is what a resume shouldn't do. Be careful that, again, what Chris and I recommend is general, not specific. So I can remember, just myself, I can remember having as many as 6 resumes prepared and locked and loaded to meet the requirements for different positions. As many as 6 I've had, because I had different experience. If I wanted to look for a help desk job, that I had specific experience for help desk, and I moved that higher up on the resume. If I was looking for analyst positions, that would be different. If I was looking for risk management positions, that would focus my resume in a different manner. If I was interested in auditing experience, that would focus my resume differently. So one resume, the best advice I can give you is don't have one resume. Look at each resume based on the vacancy announcement that you are putting your resume toward, and make sure that you focus things. Move the bullets higher, move extra information lower, or consider eliminating it entirely. You have to match the reviewer's gaze as much as possible in less than 10 seconds. And frequently, and I went and looked at some of my old resumes, frequently we tend to put in everything in the hopes that we're going to catch somebody's attention. But these days, I've seen multiple resume or multiple job vacancy announcements that said, we're limiting this to the first 100 applicants, or we're limiting this to the first 200 applicants. Realize, and especially for federal job vacancies, realize that if they are saying they're limiting it to a certain number, they have to review all of those. They can't just find the best ones. You know, the first 20 I look at, ooh, these all look good, so I'm not going to look at the other 80. If they say they are limiting it to the first 100 resumes, they have to review all 100. So that's a good thing. You want to have your resume prepared and ready to send as early as possible after the job vacancy announcement is published. All right? So in order to do that, you have to prepare your resumes in advance. Look at, here's a suggestion that I'm making for you. Look at, be reviewing vacancy announcements for particular companies ahead of time. You may or may not match it, but be watching, because if it's coming from, let's say, GDIT, General Dynamics IT, they frequently have cybersecurity vacancies, and they're frequently in response to federal announcements. All right, so I'll just say that for example. GDIT will publish vacancy announcement after vacancy announcement after vacancy announcement. Watch for them all and then see what they list. Try and match your resume to it. Apply if you like, but then make sure that your resume says, I'm applying for this type of position. If GDIT lists certain things, their next vacancy announcement is going to be very similar because it's coming from the same HR people. So you need to be reviewing job vacancy announcements and whether or not you are a good match. Watch those job vacancy announcements to make sure that your resume matches up as much as possible, as frequently as possible. And that means that one resume will not work. The best thing I can recommend to you is have a resume that is focused toward analyst, have a resume that's focused toward auditor, have a resume that's focused toward support, have a resume that's focused toward operations, because each one of those has a different set of skills and experience that they're going to look for. Any questions?
It's a great point you provide, Scotty, that you don't want to provide everything that you have in a resume. Yeah. That goes for if you earn certifications and you start learning for certifications, don't list every single certification you have. Mm-hmm. Only provide the certification that the announcement is asking for.
Right. Right. I'll give you a war story because this occurred in the last couple of months. I spoke to one of our contractors where we work, and they were talking about hiring for a particular position. And they were looking for somebody who had asset management experience. And this person that they submitted their resume, they said, you know, I'm taking my exam for my hair certification, literally hair certification, because this person currently worked in a salon. But the reader looked at it and said, why would you need HR certification? In their mind, they said HR instead of HAIR. And the individual in the interview said, oh no, this is a hair certification I'm looking for. And these folks are like, you're interviewing for an asset management position. What does hair have to do with asset management? And they rejected a resume in the middle of the interview. They said, oh, we're done. So make sure that your information is as concise as possible, focused toward the job vacancy announcement, and meets the minimums. Everything else, consider eliminating from your resume. Your resume, if it matches the vacancy announcement, will get you your interview. And it's at the interview that you have the ability to sell yourself. One other thing that I will point out I've spent almost an hour talking about this. One other thing that you should remember, if you've done something once, you've done it. Be careful that you don't exclude yourself by saying, I haven't done this enough. All right? So that's why you may start with a big resume, but then examine what packs the most punch. And again, oh, somebody has stuff in the chat. I'm sorry. Oh, somebody said be right back.
I'll walk away.
Okay, fair enough. Remember that for your bullets, they need to start with action words. And lead may not be as good as, managed or directed. I had one person that talked to me and said, I'm not comfortable with directed. And I said, well, here's the problem. If you say led, the question is then, how well did you lead them? You know, leading people is sort of like, okay, follow me. And managed is understanding the objective, or directed, understanding the objective so that the people that you manage or lead make that objective. That's a strategic sort of viewpoint. So take a look at your power phrases at the beginning of each bullet. Here's one that I will say, avoid this at all costs. Any ideas what word you should avoid in your resume for your bullets? Suggestions, thoughts, ideas? Be careful of saying responsible for. Because, and I've been in interviews where it said responsible for this. And I've asked the question, well, did you accomplish that? You know, or I was asked to do this. Okay, did you? Again, Make it focus on performance, not on aptitude. What did I do? That's in your experience blocks. That's what they're looking for. What did I do? And how well did I do it? Numbers always help. In other words, I was able to increase membership from 100 to 120. That was a 20% increase in membership, which was what we were seeking to do. That will be helpful. If you can put numbers in, it's always helpful. If you can quantify your success, it's helpful. It may be hard to do, but look for that if you can. If you say improved or focused or increased or something like that, if you can put a number on it, that would be best. Any questions?
Further discussion, Scotty, and further hints for the mentees. On announcements, you'll see something like knowledge of Active Directory or expertise in Active Directory.
Right.
There are 4 levels of knowledge. If you read about it on a website, you know it as, hey, you're familiar, you know it. There's a second level of, hey, I've done it in a lab environment, I've done it volunteer-wise. That's active knowing, okay, not professional work experience. Third one is, hey, not only do I know it, I can teach it to somebody else and I've trained somebody in it. And then the fourth one is experts. You have given talks about it in front of memberships, all that great stuff. That's how you should interpret the expert in Active Directory, working knowledge of Active Directory, not just plain knowledge of. So if you see knowledge of Active Directory, you can sit there and say, I read about it, I know about it, put that as your skill and say, I have a knowledge of Active Directory.
Right.
Now, if they sit there and come back and say, we want a working knowledge of Active Directory, you better have that in your experience block. And say, But that's something to consider when you review these job announcements about interpreting the word knowledge, being an expert, all that great stuff.
Yeah, very good. And also be careful about, and I've said this before, focus your resume. I can't tell you how many resumes I've looked at where people say, I'm good at MS-DOS. I'm good at Windows XP. Things that people no longer even use, they say, I'm good at. Well, okay, but what does that have to do with today? So make sure your resume is current and doesn't involve stuff that they're not going to use anyway.
Go ahead, Scott. Employers, if you put like Windows 7, Windows 8, be prepared for the snarky employees to apply and say, hey, how about we update to Windows 10? And why don't you update to Windows 10 or 11?
Yep, absolutely. So just before we end, I want to pitch out to everybody to please work on your incident response reports. Reportfraud.ftc.gov. Collect your spam or your malicious emails. And by the way, you can also use texts. If it comes in on your phone or your mom's phone or whatever, you can report those as well from the same website. But I wanted to show you, Gulru has just knocked it out of the park. She examined the demonstration that we did 2 weeks ago and just took over, said, I'm going to do this. So if you take a look at this, 10 reports, 8 reports, 9 reports, 10 reports, 5 reports, 10 more reports, and this was yesterday. So it will be helpful for you to do this because you will get experience. You can say, I have incident response experience. and here's, the amount of time I spent or the number of reports I submitted. You can demonstrate that you have done this. I have incident response experience. This is not an exercise. It's not a gamification. This is real life experience. And you need to be able to describe that. And that's why you hear me saying, if it passed through your mail filters successfully, that's called a false negative. And you can describe that in your interview. These were false negatives that I helped to report so that they won't occur again. And also, my reports are used by law enforcement people nationwide, 2,800. If you look at the Federal Trade Commission's frequently asked questions, 2,800 law enforcement partners use this information. It's really helpful. So I suggest you go to reportfraud.ftc.gov and read those frequently asked questions. Because when you go into your interview, you're going to be asked to talk about this. No one else I've seen does this. So you may even have to convince a hiring manager who says, what is this? And you need to be able to speak to it. This is incident response team experience. It's with the Federal Trade Commission, and it is available to 2,800 law enforcement partners nationwide for criminal investigation and analysis for possibly updating mail filters and those sorts of things. It is valuable experience, and you can demonstrate that to them when you talk to them. Any questions? I'm out of time, but anybody have any questions? Excellent. Well, thank you for participating this morning. As you can see, I'm on the road. I'm actually in a hotel room with my wife, so that's why the lighting is bad and all that sort of thing. But hey, cybersecurity never sleeps. So have fun, everybody. If you have any questions or anything, drop them into our Facebook page or our email list, and we will address them anytime. Okay? Appreciate you all. Have a great holiday weekend. Thank you, Chris. I'm sorry, go ahead. Nerman, you had something.
No, I just want to say thank you for everything. See you next week.
Okay. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.